Hi there, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Cyber Hut, where we're going to be taking a look at zero trust and how it can drive business performance. My name is Simon Moffatt. I'm founder and analyst at the Cyber Hut. It's great to have you all with us today. Before we get started and dive into today's content and some introductions, a few little housekeeping tasks. First of all, clearly we are on Zoom today, so therefore everyone is centrally muted, but we do have the chat and the Q&A session up and running, so feel free to add in any of your comments, questions or thoughts as we progress through today's webinar, and we'll try and answer those in real time, and if not, we do have a bit of time at the end to cover any questions we don't answer. Today's webinar is being recorded, so this will be made available to you afterwards via an email link and on demand. If you need to dip off before the end, this will be made available to you afterwards. But we're looking forward to getting started. My name is Simon Moffatt. I am founder and analyst at the Cyber Hut, and today we've got some special guests from Cyberelements. Mr. Jonathan Fussner is here to help with our discussions, and this is a really fascinating topic we are going to be tackling today. Going on a bit of a journey, looking at identity deployment histories, if you like, and some of the sort of trends and challenges we've seen over the years, but really spending quite a lot of time really discussing things like the modern requirements for an access management and zero trust centric identity platform. Really have a bit of a discussion really into those modern requirements and really what do those platforms look like and how they can deliver business performance and, more importantly, business value. The Cyber Hut really provides a range of industry analysis and advisory services, specifically focused on identity and access management. And we look to really empower and provide industry with a range of resources to understand some of the technical and business needs and requirements around emerging identity and access management technology. And we do that through a range of different ways, whether it's things like webinars, things like open source research, reports, training. We're home of the IAM radar, which is a vendor intelligence and tracking service, as well as things like the Week in Identity podcast as well, looking to provide as much free open source analysis and content to the community as possible. And it's absolute thrill and honor to have a special guest today, Mr. Jonathan Fussner. Jonathan, welcome. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Simon. Thanks. Good, and you?
It's great to be with you here today. I guess let's start off with some introductions, from yourself and your sort of backstory, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So my name is Jonathan Fussner. I'm leading the initiative here at Cyberelements. Cyberelements is we will say that a new SaaS platform that we are bringing up on the market. And essentially, I spent the last 15 years working with cyber companies, software companies, developing great cyber products, I would say.
Super. Well, it's looking forward to unpicking all of your experience and thoughts and comments as we progress today. It's great to have you along. And I guess our agenda today, our content, and our discussion today. 3 or 4 different sort of steps and modules, if you like, we're going to try and cover. The one I always quite like the journey aspect, trying to position where we are as an industry, where we've been, how things have behaved in the past, but sort of more importantly, maybe trying to second guess where we are heading to with this emphasis around zero trust identity and bringing in things like contextual security and privileged access management as well, and really sort of unpick the sort of backstory and the vision that Cyberelements has for the industry, which I think is quite an exciting one. So I guess let's get started into today's content, and I want to start a little bit by setting us up with where we were. Maybe we're still there a little bit, perhaps, but this is really the sort of last 15 to 20 years, I guess, of identity and access management in general. And this islands and silos approach, I think, is pretty. It resonates quite well with industry. I think that there's a couple of reasons why. I think historically we've typically seen, obviously, the typical deployment of being on premises for all sorts of applications, data, and services. The cloud is, certainly wasn't around sort of 20 years ago in many different guises, and everything was very static office locations, identity and access management and privilege management and security very much seen as a cost center. So by that, it was very much seen as a thing which organizations invested upon. They weren't necessarily looking to see a return on investment for that. And things like business relationships were very long lasting. Infrastructure was often complex and slow moving. And this resulted in several different identity patterns, if you like. Certainly things like perimeter-based security and homegrown access control, homegrown workflows, and very much looking at building out identity in very isolated pockets of an organization's infrastructure, single applications, maybe looking at privileged access management for a very small group of users, for example. And everything was very much focused on separation, often quite tactical, and often quite limited in its sort of integration characteristics. And that isn't necessarily a criticism of the identity vendors at that time, if they existed, but I think more around the how the organization was operating, how the organization itself viewed identity and access management services. And I was sort of doing some of this stuff sort of 22 years ago, and it was a bit difficult. It was very manual. It was very doing things by hand, lots of error-prone workflows there, and identity really wasn't delivering perhaps the value which maybe it should have done in the past.
Yeah, and I actually, so if you wanted to, back in the time, if you wanted to secure, I would say it was quite easy. You just had to look at the perimeter, which was quite your local network, and you just had to put some barriers around, and it was everything, I would say, inside the perimeter. That was back in the time, the situation. Just as you said, perimeter-based security, and you just had to secure the perimeter. And that was, yeah, pretty much everything and every single user and application were inside this perimeter. That was, I think, 20 years ago.
I think unfortunately that still exists, maybe a little bit, certainly, hopefully, fingers crossed, not as prolific as it used to be. But you're absolutely right that the firewall and the outside and inside and trusted and untrusted, very black and white in how organizations tackled some of those problems. And I think you're right, that related both to the network security angle and also the identity and business security angle as well too. And I think it was how our organizations viewed security at the time. That's how the vast majority of the threats were being delivered, if you like. But I do think we have evolved. And I think if we look at sort of where we are now, which I guess is sort of maybe 5 years in the past and maybe 2 or 3 years into the future, I guess, but we're sort of in this situation now where we have specialist products within the organization doing some sort of identity stuff. And we're starting to see this hybrid set of locations for data and services. Clearly on premises still exists. We did some research before Christmas around deployment models, and on premises is still a big part of this. But identity now is seen as being slightly less of a cost center and perhaps more of a business enabler, allowing the business to maybe engage in customer identity, for example, or perhaps allowing the organization to handle partnerships and supply chains and joint ventures in a slightly more dynamic way. And then clearly things like remote working, huge big emphasis on this in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, which is things like the pandemic, whatever, is certainly amplifying that. But we suddenly have things are more dynamic, relationships, locations, and such. And that, I think, has then driven specialisms. We have specialist privilege access management, we have specialist governance administration, we have specialist directories, and we have maybe an orchestration style model. You're trying to glue together lots of technologies.
And that's probably the most complex thing, trying to make the different products, I would say, compatible or talking to the one to the other. That's probably the most today the most pressing issue we see.
Yeah, I think there's the glue aspect. There's the ability to look at identity data, identity security. You're looking at orchestrating across different applications, different clouds, looking at having consistent security controls for identity across different systems. Strong MFA, yeah, I mean, it's great. Organizations looking at MFA, multi-factor authentication in certain areas, but suddenly you may have 5 or 6 different MFA components, and how do you get consistent experience and so on. So there's the technology is there, which is great, but there's a lot of it, and it is still quite separated. And standardization helps, things like 5.2 or perhaps SCIM or perhaps OAuth 2 or Connect, etc. But we still need to glue this stuff together, which I think is still posing a big cost and a big level of complexity in being able to do that, I think, for the modern enterprise.
That's definitely part, I think, of the challenge that we have to solve today, because you see, it's not only I would say a challenge for the company and the fact that you have to work with different solutions. At the end, the user and the end user, I would say, is also facing something that's not really, I would say, friendly to use and easy to use. And that's because of the fact that we are trying to combine different products, make a kind of mix and match between those products. And at the end, it's complex for the IT guys, for the security guys, but also for the user that is trying to connect to different systems, with different tools. And that's pretty much the challenge today.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I think some of those challenges are driving us towards something new, and where we're perhaps trying to head to as an industry. And I think this is where it gets really quite interesting. I think clearly we talk about meta patterns within industry and within the way sort of society and our businesses are operating, but we're definitely seeing things like data collaboration has been hugely important. We talk about complex supply chains, huge interdependency between operational technology and information technology and IoT as well. We have the whole aspect around hiring and gig economy and remote workers, and that level of complexity is really driving identity to be much more agile, much more focused on security, much more focused on things like being adaptive and responsive to all of these sort of business challenges and all of the external changes within industry. And we're definitely starting to see some patterns around this identity-centric security, which I really want to sort of unpick a little bit in more detail, because I think in the past, identity has been quite separate, I think, from the security landscape, whereas I think now actually it is foundational for things like PAM, zero trust, being able to leverage context and being able to be agile with things like access control and authorization as well. And I think in turn, that's sort of expanding into this modern requirements, do you think? And I think there's a couple of things that I want to pull out. I think number one is we're applying identity, aren't we, to lots of different identity communities or different personas and different types of identity. It's not just looking at employees anymore. We're talking about contractors, partners, operators of technology. We're talking about consumers and customers, citizens of government services. And that in itself is very, very different to having one single directory based on the VEL or LDAP or AD or whatever. It's nice and controlled, it's nice and centralized. That's a much more complex beast to have to deal with. Remote access again, so it isn't just working within an office. It could well be an individual working from home, working from a different location like a Starbucks or a coffee shop. It could well be remote partners accessing operational technology within a manufacturing or SCADA or utilities setting. You have to somehow handle and arrange access in that respect. And I guess, Jonathan, I'll pull you on this one, the sort of identity security angle. And this is where we're starting to see some really, I think, some very interesting sort of thoughts around identity. And we're starting to pull in zero trust, been around for quite a while, but it has to be empowered by identity. The ability to look at context, empower access control and authorization, be adaptive, look at things like zero standing privileges. And what's your thoughts in that security angle? Is this a new thing, or are we looking to pull in the best bits from other areas, do you think?
I think that we see lots of changes for the last, I would say, couple of years, and the fact is there's no perimeter anymore. We have, as you said, we have users working at the office, of course, but also connecting remotely from different places. At the same time, we have companies that are using applications still on premises, I would say, but they are also moving to the cloud, using cloud and SaaS applications. That's create a kind of, global ecosystem where everywhere, I would say, users are everywhere and applications are also everywhere. So you cannot still rely on perimeter-based security and trying to secure the old-fashioned perimeter. And so the only thing that we have in common between the users, the applications, and the different locations is the identity. And so that's why we have to put the emphasis on the identity and trying to set up everything again on the identity. And the identity is at the end becoming the new perimeter. That's what we see. And so you have to work around this identity and put in the different, I would say, security features depending on the identity, the context, to be sure that the right user is accessing to the right application, I would say, with the right level of security.
Yeah, I think that perimeter aspect is very interesting, and it ties neatly into what you're protecting as well. I think in the old days, your perimeter was well defined. You maybe have a data center and an office, and you have these locations well defined. But I think the other aspect to consider is the assets that the identities need access to, and that has proliferated. It isn't just a database or a mainframe that's been well controlled. It could be a SaaS system, it could be an API, it could be operational technology and dashboards for SCADA systems, and it's IoT. You've got multi-deployment models for things like SaaS, platforms as a service. So suddenly the things that you have to protect is also really distributed as well. And I guess what challenges is that bringing, do you think?
Well, the thing is, it's all about what you can control. And as I say, when as a company I'm starting to use a SaaS platform, I don't have any control on the perimeter, I would say. And so it's all about, at the end, applying, I would say, zero trust policy, which is, I would say, not trusting anyone by default and then granting access step by step, depending on the context. So it's all about this. It's all about, okay, I cannot control the different applications, locations, and so on. The only thing I can try to control is the user trying to connect to the different things. And so, yeah, let's put all the emphasis on this. Let's try to consider, I would say, a kind of zero privileges by default, and then step by step, checking who's the user, depending on his role, the context, granting access to, I would say, a very limited set of application and resources, maybe extending sometimes over control, what we call usually the just-in-time access. Those I would say strategies are really part of a modern IAM platform.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. The interesting thing when I sort of do inquiry and advisory on the buy side, one of the things that I sort of bring up and workshop quite a lot is that ability to sort of future-proof what you will need to protect as well, because organizations they have to start thinking ahead, maybe 18 months, 24 months, 36 months.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, maybe what partnerships they're going to engage with, perhaps which systems they're going to be needed over the next 2 to 3 years. How will those systems be protected? What standards or what integrations will they have? How to threat model as well. One of the things that we sort of spend a lot of time on is looking at threat models for identity. And I think what you have to protect is suddenly it's just becoming more and more. There's different things that need protecting, and that, as you say, requires it's perimeterless, it's the ability to pull in context, the ability to be agile, I think, and be able to respond to what's happening.
Definitely. And again, it's just an illusion trying to think that we can protect, I would say, everything, every application, on different locations. Doesn't make sense anymore. So again, it's all about the user and trying to secure the user as much as we can. This is where a company should go, and definitely. And the good news is that we see more and more companies that are, and especially CEOs of companies that are really, I would say, keen about the cyber incident, and that's becoming, I would say, the top risk, I would say, identified by companies. And now, before the business interruption, companies and I would say CXOs of companies see that the cyber incidents is now becoming the top risk, which was not really the case, I would say, 5 years back. So there's a big change on the way that companies see, I would say, the risk and the cyber risk. What's really also interesting is we've seen more and more companies that are investing on, I would say, cyber tools for detecting attacks. I mean, putting in place some detection and response tool, might be endpoint detection response or extended detection response. So everything around detecting attacks, but sometimes it's a bit too late. And I'm pretty sure that you have the same, I would say, opinion than me. That's why we're talking about IAM, because IAM is more about, it's just 2-3 steps before. It's about trying to protect the company before an attack is happening. So it's all about, when you talk about IAM and putting in place a zero trust approach, it's all about the say protection. It's good to have tools for detecting attacks, but it's usually too late. So we have to concentrate way before on the, I would say, the way that we can protect people connecting to the assets. Maybe if you go to the next slides, what's really interesting is to look at, I would say, the main causes of an infection. When a company is facing an attack, usually I would say the root causes are covered by, I would say, 6 domains, are starting by the credentials. That's usually the top, I would say, issue or cause that we see. So an attacker that is trying to, and is getting access to and using credentials, usually with privileges, and is able to connect to, I would say, a system. The second cause is about software update. You talked also about the OT environments, but the OT environments, we see a lot of, I would say, systems with no updates for the last 5-10 years, and that's really an issue for a company, because I'll say attackers love to connect on old-fashioned systems. And it's the same about, you know, exposing. Now a company is now, I would say, working more and more with external, as I said, external people, maybe people connecting, third parties connecting remotely, might be employees connecting from home, and so they have to expose some application resources over the internet. That creates a lot of troubles. So the more you expose, the more you're exposing your business. The same for you know, the old-fashioned VPN. Companies are using VPN and just opening all the network to users. That's a huge, I would say, breach, because the more you're opening the network, the more it's, I would say, it's really easier for an attacker to try to go on the network and try to look at the different systems that are available. So that is also part of the main causes, I would say. And of course, everything about managing third parties, so external people connecting to your network, and also using, I would say, unmanaged devices. We've seen a lot of companies struggling with, I would say, attacks and malwares, ransomware that were just spread by third parties using a specific unmanaged device. And you know, I would say third parties can be very sensitive. They are connecting on the first day to a customer, spreading the threat, then connecting the next day to another one and spreading the same threat, and so start to be a nightmare. And so, yeah, if you wanted to work on those causes, and if you wanted to, I would say, cover those, you have to work on putting in place some different solutions, starting from identity management, zero trust network access, privileged access management, to be sure that you can cover those, I would say, causes. I can ask you maybe to go to the next slide. And the thing is, it starts to be a quite impossible equation. At the end, it starts to be very, very complex. I would say, if you wanted to cover all those, I would say, causes and topics, you have to set up different solutions. One for IGA, another one for ZTNA, another one for PAM, one for CASB, and so on. And we see, I would say, more and more companies dealing on a daily basis with, let's say, 8, 10, 12 different cyber solutions, trying to glue and mix and match all those solutions. But at the end, it takes a lot of time. You have to get all the skills internally. So getting the right experts, the experts for PAM, the experts for ZTNA, and so on. And of course, at the end, you can be sure that you will not be able to have a fully mix and match between all those solutions. So it starts to be a complex equation. And if you look at combining all those different products, it starts to be a real nightmare. And at the same time, we are, I would say, for a company, we're saying, okay, you have to go for a zero trust approach, and trying to do your best to reduce, I will say, the different accesses that you give to each and every single user. Maybe if you can ask you to go to the next slide. And so when we say to a company, okay, you have to follow a kind of zero trust approach and be zero trust, which is, by the way, not just a kind of, buzzword or that we use and say, everyone is saying that they're making zero trust, but behind the zero trust, I would say, there is a real definition and four, I would say, key pillars that we see. Zero trust means, first of all, knowing exactly who's connecting to what. As I say, there is a lot of applications and companies are using different applications on different locations, on-prem, in the cloud, different cloud, I would say, platforms. People are connecting from different places. And so you really have to know exactly, you have to learn your people and giving access to only, for each people, exactly what he really needs to get for is doing his job, I would say. So knowing who's who, that's probably the first, I would say, key zero trust pillar. The second one is, I would say, is about keeping the secrets of the company secret. Actually, it sounds a bit weird, but we see a lot of companies that are giving credentials to, let's say, third parties or employees, and they will be able to connect to different systems. But at the end, it's just, again, the beginning of a big nightmare, because you don't know exactly who will be connecting to which system, and then what this user will do. And so zero trust means also keeping the secrets in a vault and only giving the right credential at the right time to the right user, and maybe sometimes, I would say, automating some actions at the end to be sure that we are only giving the minimum of information to the user to connect and to do his job. It's also making, I would say, IT and OT, I would say, assets, systems, totally invisible. At the end, you don't have, not because you have users that are connecting remotely, that you have to expose your assets. We see, again, more and more companies that are just publishing over the internet some applications, some servers. And again, it's just exposing yourself, exposing your company to I would say, to some potential attacks. So you have to keep them invisible and to set up something in the middle that will be, I would say, the bridge between your users and the assets that are totally invisible. And it will be the job of this bridge, of this platform, to give, again, the right access at the right time to the right user. So it's at the end, that's the last one. It's at the end isolating the user, the accessor, I would say, and the accessee, the resource, the assets. Okay, we don't have to let them communicate it directly. We have to set up something in the middle, and again, controlling exactly the flow, data, and what we are, I would say, allowing between the user and the application. That's, I'll say, those are the key pillars of a real zero trust approach that we I would say promote to companies and organizations today. That's part of a real zero trust strategy.
Do you think I think it's really interesting. There's two things I'd add here. I think you're absolutely right. Number one, knowing who's who and what they can do and where they can do it, and the typical who, what, when, why sort of conundrum there. Do you think organizations really have a good understanding of that? The impression I get from sort of inquiry and advisory work is it's very difficult to have that visibility over your identities, where they are, where they're stored, what they're doing, the permissions they have, even the systems that they have access to. And do you think that sort of step one, is that difficult, do you think, for many organizations, just knowing who's who?
It's absolutely, yeah. It's at the end, you can be sure that every single organization will not be able to have the full visibility. It's just it's not also realistic. So that's why we have some companies that are just trying to say, okay, we are just acting a kind of zero trust by default. So no one is accessing, and then try to open step by step, granting step by step, instead of opening, I would say, all the doors and then trying to close, I would say, the different doors when we say that this door should not be open to this user. But you're right, at the end, it's starts to be really complex to know exactly, the applications you have, the servers, the different credentials on the different directories, might be centralized directories, might be local ones. It's sometimes, yeah, complex. And that's, part of, for example, a privileged access management, I would say, approach that we usually have is trying to discover all the assets, all the credentials, to give the, I would say, the best as possible view to the company in terms of what kind of credentials they have, what kind of assets they have, and then trying to build based on that, I would say, the first access rights and access policies. And sometimes it's better to say, okay, we prefer to block an access to someone that is, I would say, legitimate, and then opening it because it's just raising the hand saying, hey, back in the time, I've got access to this application, and it's not the case anymore. Okay, it's a kind of we're just adapting, I would say, the model and updating the access policies. But that's probably the best approach, I would say. But you're right, it's really difficult for a company to have the full visibility of exactly what they have. It's
yeah, that makes sense. I think it is difficult. I think, ironically, it's becoming more difficult because of the proliferation of identities and assets and things involved. But I think it's definitely a really good starting point. So it does sound like we need a platform, doesn't it? It sounds like we need a broad array of capabilities here.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we believe at Cyberelements, and that's the reason why we've created Cyberelements, actually, because we've seen, again, a lot of companies struggling back in a time with different products. As I said, trying to glue everything into something that seems to be unified, but at the end it's not, and especially not for the company and not for the user. And the idea with Cyberelements is to bringing all the elements. That's the reason why we've named this platform Cyberelements, because we are helping any organization to secure every kind of, I would say, user context. Might be, as we said just before, employees working at the office or maybe working from home, might be third parties connecting remotely, usually using I would say, on a bring your own device policy. So using a device that you don't have the control. And on the other side, giving access to any kind of application. And that's, again, we see a wide variety of applications, might be still on-prem and still legacy apps, but also cloud applications, SaaS applications. We'll see also more and more companies that want to secure access not only to IT systems, but also to OT systems. That's quite new, I would say. It's a huge trend that we see for the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And it's really interesting because it was, I would say, probably the last perimeter, if I can say that was not really secured or under the control of, I would say, a security platform. And so the idea with Cyberelements is to bring everything that a company needs from an access, I would say, access security point of view, starting from identity, being sure that we're giving access to only the right people at the right time, the right access, I would say, giving the secure access to the applications that they really need, And for some people that needs to connect to, I would say, sensitive data or sensitive applications, adding on top, I would say, privileged access management, which is, again, recording sessions, analyzing in real time, and also looking at the behaviors. That being said, I would say it's a unified experience, again, being sure that we are giving the right access, the right secure access to the right user, depending on the context, to the right application. That's what we wanted to do, what we are bringing on the market with Cyberelements. It's this unified experience. And again, we'll see that just later on, but there is a huge link between the business performance and the security. And that's I would say, the angle, and that's what we are bringing here on the table.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept. I certainly think things like privileged access and zero trust are becoming such a key part, really, of how organizations do business. And by that, I mean, they shouldn't just be focused on one or two parts of the organization. You know, those principles, just in time, context, zero standing, you know, having strong authorization in place there should be universal, shouldn't it, across a range of identities and systems. And I think definitely the angle of things like behavioral analysis, you know, understanding what is good behavior, what's bad behavior. And one of the things that we're involved with is a thing called the Identity Threat Assessment Framework, and part of that is looking at, you know, good users sometimes do bad things, and it could be just through mistakes, or perhaps security controls are not allowing them to do their jobs. But also the bad guys, they sometimes do good things, and by that I mean they masquerade, or they use credentials that they've stolen, or, you know, perhaps they behave in a way which is just below certain thresholds, which would flag behavior of being sort of risky, or being of adversarial in nature. So I think we're definitely moving and seeing greater emphasis on being able to understand behaviors and identifying baseline patterns and comparing how one user acts to either themselves, and have they changed over a period of time, and certainly versus their peer groups as well. It's definitely a fascinating area.
Well, and you know, it's also about outside the context, because we see more and more users that on one day are just a kind of regular business user accessing to a business application, and you just giving I would say the right secure access to this application. But the next day, the same guy might be in a different context, a privileged users, and so you have to adapt and to adjust. And in this context, I would say maybe enabling PAM features, session recording, analysis, because this guy is accessing to a different type of resource, different type of application. So it's back to what we said just before. We are not still in a black and white situation with a good perimeter, with good guys inside and bad guys outside. We are multiple perimeters, and we have to deal with different kind of users in different situations. And again, I'd say users might be in different situations from one day to another. And so you have to set up a platform that will adjust the level of security depending on the context. That's really the unified experience, adapting the experience both for the user and for the company, for the organization.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah, I think that context change, as you say, it applies to both the identities, the systems, the why, you know, why they need access to those systems. I think that is definitely something where if you can get that right as an organization, not only do you reduce risk, you improve usability, but you're right, you actually improve usability from the sort of admin and the operational side as well, because you're not having to have thousands of static rules or static signatures or things to check. It becomes more responsive to what's happening within inside the business, and essentially identity of any type, really, whether it's consumer, workforce, operational, it has to support the business. And I think the business is the area where that agility is becoming very, very important. So I think that's really quite a smart observation.
Yeah, and then at the end, it's probably I said a good transition talking about business performance, because at the end, this is what we believe. If a company can set up, and that's again that's what we had in mind when we wanted to, and when we build, I would say, Cyberelements, is to make, I would say, the connection between the business performance and the security. And you don't have to choose between the two, because it was back in the time the case, I would say, thinking up complex solutions, and at the end, it was a nightmare for users, and then it has a dramatic impact, I would say, on the business performance. And what we've done in Cyberelements is building a platform that is on a self-service mode, so you can just go on Cyberelements.io, clicking on sign up, and you will get access in less than 3 minutes to your own platform. And so it's really easy to deploy, I would say. You don't have to spend days and days deploying multiple solutions and trying to glue and to mix and match. And then you can start configuring your resources, configuring the access rights, and giving very quickly, instantly access to applications to users. That's the key, and you can start using the features of Cyberelements. And the features that we are bringing inside the Cyberelements platform are features that we are developing for the last 15 years, and that are still used, again, for the last 15 years by customers from Systancia. Systancia is, by the way, the company that is behind Cyberelements. And so we are bringing on the table this 15 years of track record with Systancia. So means that the Cyberelements platform is really reliable, with multiple thousands of customers already using the features that we are bringing on this new SaaS platform. And that's really, I would say, the link between business performance and security. If you have the right tools, or really easy to deploy, really easy to use for the end users, then the users will be, I would say, in a trusted position, and so they will be able to do their job, and at the end, the company will perform much better, I would say.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I imagine Systancia have quite a broad customer base as well. I'm assuming different sectors, different sizes.
Yeah, it's a company that is in the business for the last 20 years and 15 years in the cyber industry. And so we have thousands of customers in different sectors, quite all sectors, I would say, and in different countries across the globe. So it's not just, I would say, a project that's just, I would say, raising from nowhere. It's actually I would say, the result of a lot of experience, and yeah, that's just I would say, the best we have at Systancia, and we are just bringing this on Cyberelements with a single SaaS offering that is, again, dedicated to companies that wanted to secure and I would say at the end perform much better.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting, to the community to understand that story, and it sounds like, Systancia have, I guess, gone through the pain, if you like, of working with those customers over a long period of time, seeing what works, understanding, where their pain points are, and obviously then looking to build out this story around the unified platform, which I think is certainly very fascinating. I guess we're sort of wrapping up, or sort of coming towards the sort of end of the discussion. It's been enlightening for me. I think identity is continually evolving. We've all sort of seen the progress that has been made, both in the sort of technology space and within industry, within process, and within things like workflow, and understanding where identity can both enable the business and reduce risk as well. And I do think certainly we need to embrace the things like being contextually aware, being adaptive, pulling in the best parts of PAM, pulling in the best parts of Zero Trust, and having that centralized mechanism to join users and their various different assets they wish to ask. We've got a little bit of time for questions. There's one or two questions come through. I guess first question there is how do organizations get started? Is it simply a case of starting with the software and downloading, or is it like a process thing they should do as well? You mentioned those four pillars earlier. Is literally knowing who is that often the best place to start?
The best way to start is definitely to go on Cyberelements.io, and you can start for free and getting a free 30 days trial, and literally in 3 minutes you get your own platform. you have the console in front of you, and we are guiding you through the different, we're just imagining different use cases, I will say, use cases that we've seen with our customers. And so we are guiding you through the process of declaring and configuring your application and resources, then jumping to the access rights and managing users, managing rights, and at the end, giving access very quickly to your users. So all what you have to do is just signing up with Cyberelements. There's nothing else I would say to start than just going on Cyberelements. It's a full SaaS solution. If you wanted to connect applications that you have on premises, there is a small gateway that you can download. It's a virtual machine, and this will be the link between your on-premises, I would say, organization and the Cyberelements platform. And again, inside the platform, we are guiding you through different use cases, just being sure that you will, through those user guiding process, be able to discover all the features and how we, on a zero trust approach, how we give access, I would say, step by step. Applications, then user access, and then down to the user. So we've tried to do something very simple to use, very easy to, again, to deploy.
I see. That makes sense. There's a couple of, I guess, sort of follow-on questions from there, which you sort of semi-answered already. But number one was, what components are required client side, and then what requirements are there for connectors, etc., on premises? So you mentioned there's a gateway. I guess, are there anything else which needs to be added in the client environment?
Yeah, in terms of connecting to your applications, as I said, it's just a small gateway that you have to deploy. If you're talking about a SaaS application, there's nothing special, I would say, to deploy. The gateway is only for, I would say, on-premises or private cloud. If you want to connect applications that you have on your own network, I would say. And from a user perspective, all what you have to do is connecting to the user portal. You will see the different applications that you have depending on your context, again, and your role. And you can just launch all the apps inside the web browser. So it's an HTML5 by default access. And there is also a small agents that you can deploy on your computer, or might be a Windows PC, might be a Mac, whatever. You can also use those clients if you want to have this small agent, as we say, on your computer.
Sounds good. That sounds excellent. I guess next aspect is that sort of calls to action. Obviously, you mentioned the ability to sort of sign up on the website. I guess there's ability to arrange a demo as well, I presume.
Yeah, for sure. We have a great team that is ready for giving live demo. We also have a pre-recorded demo, so if you want to get a video and just a quick introduction about the product, the console, and the first use cases that we are covering. It's all on the website. Just go on cyberelements.io, and you will get the, I would say, the recorded video. And if you want to have a live one, it's not an issue. You just have to pick up a slot on the calendar, and you will talk to the team. Yeah.
Super, fantastic stuff. I guess, from the Cyberport perspective, reach out to us. Anything around that, understanding vendor intelligence or CISO advisory around designing for things like identity and zero trust and necessary training. Our emails are there, so feel free to reach out directly and spam us both with questions and comments and thoughts, or as Jonathan says, you head straight to the cyberelements.io website. There's a resources page there to download some extra information as you need. Jonathan, this has been a fascinating conversation as ever. It's certainly always learned something from chatting with you and the team there. It's certainly identity is definitely on a journey, and it sounds like we're heading to this modern panacea where we have hopefully security and usability solved, maybe at some stage in the not too distant future. So this has been a fascinating conversation. Hope our listeners and audience have found it insightful too. Any last sort of minute comments or thoughts before we close?
I think we are pretty much. I don't know if there is any question, but yeah, it was really a good this conversation, I would say, and I'm pretty sure that we can talk about identity and access management for hours, I would say. So, and we'll probably have a great conversation over the next couple of months on different subjects, because there's so much, as I said, there's so much things to discover, to talk, and this IAM space is moving a lot, and so yeah, it was also a great pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I agree. I think identity is moving at the speed of sound, which is great. I think it shows identity being so hugely foundational now to organizational success, way more than it was maybe 20 years ago, when it was just an LDAP directory in a closet somewhere. It's definitely empowering the security conversation, as well as empowering the business to share more, do more, and be more successful. This has been fascinating chat. This has been recorded, so we'll send a copy of the recording to you afterwards. But Jonathan and the Cyberelements team, thank you for attending. Thank you to our listeners and viewers. And until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.